Hello and welcome to In Motion, the Compass podcast. Compass is the Community Planning Association of Southwest Idaho. We plan for the future of Ada and Canyon counties and aim to give you the most up-to-date information on what's being planned in your area, provide updates and information regarding the region's long-range transportation plan, Communities in Motion 2050, and to keep you in the loop about Compass events so that you can be involved in the future of transportation here in the Treasure Valley. Today we're here with Suseel Indrakanti. He is the practice lead for resilience and sustainability at Cambridge Systematics. He has 17 years of experience in climate risk and resilience assessments, transportation planning, and climate mitigation and adaptation. He is also an alumnus of Boise State University with a Master's of Civil Engineering. We are so happy to welcome him back to the Treasure Valley to discuss transportation resilience with us. We're also joined by Austin Miller, our principal planner and planning team lead with Compass, and he's going to be here to offer some regional perspective as well.
Thanks, Josie, for that introduction.
Absolutely. We're so happy to have you here. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, as you mentioned in your introduction, I lead the risk and resilience practice at Cambridge Systematics. As it relates to resilience, we support a various range of clients, supporting them identify their climate risks and also enhancing their transportation system resilience. So we support state DOTs and MPOs develop resilience improvement plans post the bipartisan infrastructure law passing and lead national research on some of these topics of risk and resilience, conduct vulnerability and risk assessments for transportation infrastructure, and so on and so forth.
Awesome. Could you possibly define resilience for us?
Yeah, so there are several definitions laid out by nodal agencies, including Federal Highways, AASHTO, and other ones. The one that is generally used, accepted, happens to come from Federal Highways Administration Order 5520, which defines it as the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and adapt to changing conditions and withstand, respond to, and recover rapidly from disruptions. So the need for transportation system resilience is multifold. One being that you would minimize losses and damage to your transportation assets. There is a value of time component to your residents and of the Treasure Valley in terms of lost time, lost productivity, and all of that you are trying to minimize by being more resilient, especially in face of disruptions. So those are some of the reasons why transportation resilience is very important.
So was there a major event or impetus that sparked the conversation on transportation resilience in policy specifically?
Yes. So before resilience was a buzzword, it was initially done under the umbrella of emergency management for a long time. And then in the year 2006 or thereabouts, there was a Gulf Coast study that conducted the vulnerability and risk analysis of assets, transportation assets in the Gulf Coast region done by Federal Highways and US DOT as part of the US climate change program. That led to a lot of research by the Federal Highways in this area and has then taken on the form of successive adaptation pilots. And there have been 3 rounds of Federal Highways pilots conducted over the years. And now, with bipartisan infrastructure law, there is an emphasis on resilience improvement, developing resilience improvement plans, investing in resilience as part of evacuation routes, coastal infrastructure, at-risk infrastructure, and also things like planning for resilience.
How new is the concept of planning for transportation resilience yet?
So if you look at it based on events that have happened, 2005 was when Katrina happened, and it was also a series of storms, including Irene, other storms that followed all of that. So that period, starting from 2005 all the way to 2011, thereabouts, I think kickstarted a lot of these vulnerability assessments and risk assessment work for transportation agencies.
So it is fairly new, I guess, in the grand
you could
scheme
call
of
it
things.
So, yes.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. And we'll just jump into specifics here for our region. So I might look towards Austin for some of these. Compared to some other regions in the U.S., the Treasure Valley is relatively safe from catastrophic natural disasters like tropical storms, hurricanes, like you just mentioned, tornadoes, etc. But we are susceptible to wildfires, flooding, earthquakes, and winter storms like the infamous 2017 Snowmageddon, as we love to call it. These kinds of events can impact our ability to travel from place to place, obviously, and make things very difficult for our transportation system. So what changing conditions and extreme weather events in our region or in the western U.S. might impact the transportation system or in our area?
Absolutely. So here at Compass, for those who haven't been listening to our podcast so far, certainly please do go check out some of our other ones. But we really serve our member agencies. The member agencies can be the counties, the cities. One of them is actually also Boise State University. And Boise State does have the Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute, so HCRI, if you Google that, it does come up. And specifically, they on their website do list a couple elements in how they really relate to the Treasure Valley, or at least southwestern Idaho. They are looking at poor air quality is certainly something we have struggled with here as a region and want to continue to monitor moving forward. We've experienced some pretty severe flooding events in recent years. If those continue or get worse, make sure we're planning for those efforts. As you mentioned, wildfires happen every summer, unfortunately. That contributes to the air quality, but the fires themselves are also damaging. Drought, and then just big winter storms. We had a decent amount of snowfall this year. As those events happen, what are those impacts to our transportation system is really what we're trying to analyze.
So as we talk about those things, what exactly constitutes a transportation-related type of disaster? What would have to happen for it to be considered a disaster, I guess?
I would say that's going to mean different things to different people. However, one thing that we do typically see is a resiliency plan typically includes critical corridors, and those critical corridors could be the interstate, so here I-84 or even I-184, the connector into downtown Boise. While we haven't conducted our resiliency plan yet, I would imagine those being the prime automobile movers in our region would show up on there. However, for other users of the transportation system, our Greenbelt, I would argue, is a very critical and highly susceptible corridor for our active transportation communities. And anyone who wants to get out, walk, bike, enjoy nature, there's portions of the Greenbelt that get flooded out every single year. We've seen it this year. So being able to manage those for all people and what's a disaster is kind of just going to depend on what situation they're in.
I think the more appropriate word there is disruption.
Yeah.
Okay.
Disaster, it has a very specific meaning in terms of a declaration of from an emergency management standpoint. So in this case, a complete or partial damage or loss to your infrastructure as an asset or a system is considered one of those disruptions. And it could also have some very significant impacts to the community itself. That could range from safety issues, loss of life, property, all of that, to just mobility impacts, huge delays, waiting times, detours, loss of quality life, and all of that can constitute disruption as well. So tagging on what Austin just mentioned about potential stressors and all of that, so two sources of that information are your state and local hazard mitigation plans. And the third thing is more looking into the future, which comes through the National Climate Assessment's State Climate Summary, which has Idaho-specific information on some of the key messages for what is going to happen potentially as it relates to climate and trends going into the future. So 3 things have been called out on that front. One being warmer climate, 2 degrees Fahrenheit or higher has already happened, which has resulted in drought and a cascading wildfire risk, which you are noticing more and more, and also the fact that warming has led to winter and springtime precipitation, not snow, but rainfall, which is leading to a lot of these floods that you are experiencing.
As a planner, what is important to consider about these types of natural disasters or events in transportation planning?
So typically, the approach is threefold when it comes to what planners can do. The first one being identification or assessment of system vulnerabilities and risks. And that could be a desktop exercise followed by a detailed assessment at individual sites, locations, examples of what Austin just mentioned, critical roadways, vulnerable assets that you have identified, including Greenbelt and sections of I-84, 184, all of that. The second part is how does that information, which becomes the body of work, then get integrated into your planning process. And this gets done in multiple different ways, one of which is supporting your project prioritization. And the third one is communication. So you have this wealth of information, you have integrated that into your planning processes. The next step would be then to communicate that to a range of stakeholders. That would include your planning partners. That includes general public. To tell them what you have found, what is the uncertainty associated with your predictions or trends, what you have been able to put together, and then communicating how you are making changes to your planning processes and thereby investments. So if you don't plan, it becomes a more reactive exercise. Disruptions will be longer, losses will be magnified, and there will be disruptions which will impact the quality of life of the residents of Treasure Valley. It is also good planning to be proactive so that disruptions and risks are not taken away from your priorities for investment and the money being funneled towards addressing loss and damage to your assets, to your systems, and all of that. So it is overall good planning to be proactive and plan to be resilient.
And we're definitely in the business of being good planners at Compass. It might be a good time to talk about the Compass deliverables that we have regarding resilience. So my next question was, what is the first step we should take as planners to improve our regional resiliency, specifically in the Treasure Valley? And I know Compass has been working on a resiliency plan, correct, Austin?
Yeah, so we're actually just getting started. I was going to say the first step is to do the resiliency plan, and that's really where we are at right now. So recently, the Compass Board of Directors allocated some funding for staff to draft up a scope of work that we can then release and hopefully get a consultant on board to help conduct a resiliency plan for the Treasure Valley, specifically looking at the needs for Ada and Canyon counties. So us at the staff level, we've received that direction. We're working on that scope of work, getting our way, and plan to hopefully get a consultant on board later this year and really get moving so we can make sure that we're best prepared in the future.
We'll just jump into the, so specifically segueing into infrastructure, I suppose. What can we do to focus on infrastructure dependability?
While we haven't conducted our plan yet, there's no specific projects identified. However, a few sort of like low-hanging fruit that conceptually I would expect to come out of this are looking at the bridge crossings of the Boise River. Are they currently constructed in a way that is more resilient to the floods we've been seeing? Are they at risk of, if a greater flood comes in, could it render one of those critical crossings unusable for a period of time until it's maintained? If so, is there a way that we can get out ahead of that? And similarly we have a lot of homes up in the foothills. As we alluded to earlier, there's fires that seem to sprout up every summer, making sure that those homes up there have multiple access points to them. There's some redundancy in the system, so if one roadway is rendered unusable for a period of time, those residences still have a place to get, not only for safety purposes, but those quality of life purposes as well.
Awesome. So what are some mitigation strategies for improving mobility and access to services when disaster strikes? I guess you kind of just mentioned one, having multiple routes to certain areas. Are there any other mitigation strategies that we could employ?
This is as comprehensive as the definition of resilience itself. There are a wide range of adaptation strategies that can be brought to bear, not to increase the robustness of the asset or the system itself, where you are either making it stronger by building it to higher standards or elevating it when there is flooding or overtopping, and all of that goes back to the issue of redundancy when it comes to zones or communities being stranded, as Austin just mentioned, in the foothills, and providing some of those communities with lifelines to evacuate. So there are a wide range of strategies that can be brought to bear from multiple points of view, and it's also dependent on how resourceful an agency can be to mobilize resources at hand to be able to make a difference during those disruptions and post-disaster recovery.
Cool. And I don't mean to completely analyze like the Treasure Valley and what can we do different, I suppose. But if there are good mitigation strategies that we could, talk about, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, there is.
I didn't mean to.
There are toolboxes out
Toolboxes?
there. Yeah.
Sweet. I'm glad they exist in case we need them. Let's just jump right into the next one. So, Suseel, in your career, you have led various climate risk and resilience assessments for local, state, national, and international clients. In your view, what policies have made the biggest impact on creating a transportation system that is more resilient to extreme weather?
So policies are just one instrument of dealing with or making a change in organizations which are dealing with a novel concept like resilience. It works when there is a champion at the top and there is a top-down approach an agency is taking. So in those kinds of situations, a policy really helps to instruct your mid-level and even operating staff about what to do and what it means for their day-to-day job descriptions and how planning for resilience or being resilient changes all of that. But more organic approaches have been taken by agencies all across the U.S. and around the world, including coming up with working groups, cross-functional working groups, people from planning, design, maintenance, operations, all of them coming together and banding together as a task force or a working group to identify what resilience means to them, how does it affect their job on a day-to-day basis, what changes they have to make their function area, but also the agency and the assets and the transportation system more resilient. And then showing proofs of concept on what they have been working together and scaling it up once they have proven that. So this is one of the ways that has been successfully worked on and demonstrated across many agencies. But yes, it's not just the technical side of things that drives resilience, but also the higher level management, support, champion, executive level staff who need to buy into the concept of resilience.
So how does extreme weather disproportionately affect underserved populations?
So it all starts with understanding the needs of equity populations, their mobility needs in specific, and their day-to-day needs, which are going to be different from the general populations, especially more so for transit-dependent equity populations because of not having access to different forms of transportation that we take for granted. It also important to not just understand the needs, but also come up with strategies that fulfill their needs. And these are a different suite of adaptation strategies that might need to be developed in the first place or to be explored even more, which are slightly different from your traditional adaptation strategies. And this comes with engaging with them early and more, and getting a better sense of what their day-to-day needs are going to be, and especially more so under disrupted conditions.
Awesome. Well, the second part of that question would how can you foresee these populations being affected in the Treasure Valley if there were to be a disaster? Austin, could you see any kind of disproportionate effects going on if there were to be a natural disaster in the Treasure Valley?
Yeah, so in my initial thoughts, underserved communities are exactly that. They're underserved. And right now in our community, we do have specific areas where there's just less transportation options being provided to people. So if there is that transportation disruption that takes away the dominant mode or method of transportation, it's going to be even more impactful because it's so heavily relied upon. So I often try to I know I had mentioned redundancy earlier. You can call it different options available to it, however you want to sort of say the same thing, just making sure that if one way of doing things happens to be disrupted, that they have other options they can turn to and just decide what works best for them and their family at that time.
Absolutely. How could climate shift impact our transportation projects? How could it impact our local economy as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we do have a major disruption of some sort, that can obviously come with some financial repercussions to it. And with a lot of these type projects, it's not one of those you can just bury your head in the sand, so to speak, and pretend it's not going to happen and expect it to be all right, because to some degree, these are happening already. So it's best to be able to plan for them, do the necessary maintenance upfront and early, because if you stay on top of maintenance, kind of like your teeth, I guess, so to speak, if you're regularly brushing, doing that day-to-day maintenance, it'll save you a big expenditure down the line. And as you're doing those maintenance projects, it can be tough because there might be some other regional project that we might want to do, and taking away funds for maintenance of something that may not seem a glaring need at the moment can be a hard decision to make. However, with this resiliency plan, we're trying to provide that information to our decision makers so they can make that informed decision on how to best serve our community moving forward with what projects they're deciding to fund.
Perfect. So thank you so much, Suseel and Austin, for joining us today. For more information, please visit our website, compassidaho.org. If you need to reach us, or if you would like to submit ideas for future episodes, please email us directly at info@compassidaho.org. Thanks for listening. Drive safely, Treasure Valley.